Hey everybody, Will Fix here. Got another show for you today. We're hosting Andy Schectman, owner of Miles Franklin. Andy and his father started the company years ago. They are a precious metals exchange. You can purchase precious metals at milesfranklin.com. And the difference between most companies and this company is really Andy. Andy, years ago, was talking about the de-dollarization process, what Saudi Arabia was possibly going to do, and what he had laid out it's scary how exact it is. I mean, if you look at his messages from several years ago, it's like you're reading today's newspaper. It's like he was able to see today from then. And it's scary how accurate it was. He does have his mind wrapped around gold, silver, finances, and a lot about the crypto environment and how things may go. So in the future. And he is sharing his thoughts today about several things. And we got a good interview here, and he graced us with his presence. So I hope you like the show. And here's Andy. Let's go ahead and get started. Really found out about you a couple of years ago when you started talking about de-dollarization.
Yes, sir.
And God, did you nail it or what? I mean, come on.
It's been pretty crazy, actually. It's almost scary to me, William. Like, it's scary because what I saw was really clear to me, but it's like that's an anomaly. I haven't had that type of clarity with anything in my career. But it just stuck out. Maybe I was at the right place at the right time after all these years and being in this industry to see it. But it frightens me how fast it's accelerating, and the underestimation by the public is concerning to me as well, by the people in charge.
Yeah. Okay. I'll probably let that be a little bit of the start of the video. Well, welcome everybody. We have Andy Schectman on the show today, and he's graced us with the opportunity to have him on so that he can speak on a few topics for us. Thank you, Andy, for spending time with us today. I appreciate it.
Sincerely, William, the pleasure is mine, brother. I'm happy to be here, and thanks for the invite.
Yes, sir. Like I said, that was the introduction that I got with you, and then was the topic we were just talking about, de-dollarization, and I am blown away how spot on. I mean, here we are realizing all of the things that you had anticipated, and then you had mentioned even a few times, with currencies and different things going gold-backed, and how gold and silver is going to probably have a part to play. And I wonder now, because things have shifted with the crypto market has become a little more. Do you have any ideas about how that may blend? I know Tether just announced that they're going to be backing by gold. Do you have something about that?
Yeah, I mean, and I've been pretty consistent with that, I think, for a while now, at least for the last few years. In fact, I started talking about it really in March of 2020, if memory serves me right, when Nancy Pelosi came out with the findings from her House Subcommittee Finance bill that viruses could live on paper currency. I'm like, well, that's the end of the paper currency system as we know it, that they're going to push towards a digital dollar. And for people who want really good prices that we don't publish on the website, send us an email at info@milesfranklin.com. Say, William Fix sent me, and we'll make sure that you get a special price list.
Excellent.
One that will be probably more competitive than just about anyone in America. And we don't publish that for various reasons. We like to keep it close to the vest, but we only allow purchasing up to 10,000. And on that website, a version 2, which will really kind of be a complete makeover, which will be far more user-friendly, is near completion. And that will be rolled out very soon. But in the meantime, certainly you can go there for information, and thank you for the compliment. But if people want prices that will be very tough to be beat, send us an email at info@milesfranklin.com. Any questions that you may have as well, you can be asked, and we'll reply to them. Or if you just want the price list, that'd be great too. But it will be worth your listeners' times to do that, to see the prices that we can offer for your listeners. One that would enable, of course, all of the things that the CBDC does in terms of control and in terms of monitoring and whatnot, but that seemed to be like opening the door to it. Zoltan Pozsar is a man who I follow, William, and have for quite some time. I find him to be one of the brightest minds in the industry, and he used to work at UBS. At the New York Fed. He's now at UBS. He was at the New York Fed and understands, in my mind, the plumbing of the Western system perhaps better than anybody. And so the bottom line is that he's talked about the system we're in now being called Bretton Woods 3. Well, Bretton Woods 1 is when the US dollar took over for the pound sterling at the end of World War II. Loosely, Bretton Woods 2 would have been, ironically, 50 years ago last week, when the dollar became the petrodollar, signing the deal with Saudi Arabia, the protection deal. And for that privilege, they would value oil globally in dollars and reinvest excess proceeds in U.S. treasuries. And as we have just found out last week, they have decided to not re-up that agreement. To in essence be free to sell oil in whatever currency that they would like. And that puts us square in the middle of Bretton Woods 3. And this is where Zoltan Pozsar says it's all about commodities and transparency, where the currencies that purchase these commodities are worth less than the commodities they are purchasing. In other words, he who has the commodities makes the rules. It always used to be he who has the gold, which the BIS reclassified as the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset in 2019. But I would say it's more than that. It's the base metals. Let's not forget that China bought the London Metals Exchange, which is the base metal hub of the world. It's the rare earths where most are made in the Eurasian, or produced and refined in the Eurasian continent. It's commodities in general, even soft commodities like wheat and corn and soybeans and you name it. But in order to transact a system that is lacking confidence, a system that, much like all currencies going all the way back to Roman times, in fact, I don't have a coin here anywhere, but if you look at one of your quarters or your dimes, they have ridges on them. And if you look at gold coins and silver coins that are made by sovereign governments, they have ridges on them. And the reason those ridges are there was go all the way back to Roman times, where you could draw a parallel to where we are now, when they had to finance their wars and their expansion all throughout the world, and paying their soldiers to represent the interests of the state. They would pay them in gold and silver coins. But they realized if we just trim a little bit around the edges on every single coin and all the coins we're making, well, we'll have enough trimmings to make a whole bunch of other coins. Eventually, they just started going from precious metals to metals like copper and just debase the whole thing. But the moral of the story is that going all the way back to Roman times, governments have chosen inflation over austerity. In other words, printing over tough decisions. And so we've lost trust. And trust is like a glass that you throw against the wall and realize, oh no, what did I just do? I need to put that back together before mom and dad get home. Ain't gonna happen. And so we are in a situation, to your point, of where I think it is now a system that is moving away from debt-based promises, opaque debt instruments like treasuries issued by a government with over 100% debt to GDP ratio, a government that is looked upon around the world by many, at least in the Southern Hemisphere, William, as being wholly hypocritical, where we can invade Iraq 20 years ago under the guise of weapons of mass destruction, say, oh, sorry, we didn't find any. Yeah. But here we are 20 years later, still occupying their country, sanctioning 14 of their banks for having the nerve to trade with the Iranian banking system to buy liquid natural gas because they're frying in the summer, 120-degree heat. And so what did Iraq do? They have started process of kicking Western coalition forces out of the country. They have made trading in dollars illegal. If you own a business and do so, you'll wind up in jail and your business will belong to the state. They have formally applied to the BRICS, and they have also made all green dollar bills, ones, fives, tens, 20s, hundreds, out of the country. No banks hold them anymore. So much of the world, and I say that as an example, or where Janet Yellen can do an interview with CNBC 3 weeks ago and say, listen, China, we're okay with you being friends with Russia. My initial thought was, well, geez, thanks, Madam Secretary. That's very benevolent of you, seeing as that we're partners in BRICS. But if you give one penny to the Russian system, to their war effort, we will sanction your banks, your companies, and Beijing itself. Never mind the fact that we have given $260 billion with nary a drip of congressional oversight to the Ukraine, because we're holier than thou, and our what doesn't stink. So the point of it is that we are viewed as hypocritical. And so trust is that broken glass against the wall. Who the hell's going to trust us ever again when we have proven we will weaponize and confiscate and steal your treasuries, your assets, if we don't align ideologically? What I mean by that, the House just approved a bill to steal, let's just call it what it is. Steal the $5 billion in Russian assets and use it to buy munitions to give to the foe that they are fighting. Now, when you are the world reserve currency, this is not your prerogative, let alone a country that dictates things all around the world. Now, let me just first make a statement. I am a patriot. This country has done more for me than I could ever dream of. And nothing makes me more angry than watching us destroy the privilege of being the beacon of freedom and liberty and justice and the world reserve currency and everything we are doing. I would say this current administration has done more to destroy this country in any respect than any external foe could have ever have done. And so doing things like not just weaponizing the dollar, but confiscating assets of another country and using them to fund the war efforts of the foe they're in the middle of a war with, that is a line very difficult to come back from. So you put all of that together, massive inflation, where a country has chosen inflation over austerity, the way all governments do or have, a weaponizing of the dollar and the reserve currency. And I think you have entered a new era, as Zoltan Pozar calls it, where this is not about promises and debt instruments anymore. This is about commodities and transparency, the melding of gold, which, by the way, the Bank of International Settlements, William, reclassified as the world's only other tier one reserve asset in 2019. And so when you see the central banks buying the level of gold that they have over the last 3 years, more so than at any time ever in history, and at the same time, you look at a bank like India, who just bought 1.5 times the first 4 months of this year, bought 1.5 times what they bought all of last year, but repatriated 100 metric tons from the Bank of England, which in essence would be the London Metals Exchange. This follows suit with the massive amount of gold buying that we have seen coming out of all of the world's central banks, and the repatriation, the removal of counterparty risk like we've seen, starting with the German Bundesbank in 2017, shortly thereafter, the Bank of Austria, Turkey, Hungary, Poland, the Czech National Bank, and all of these banks repatriating their gold. And then that just happened again here the other day, where you had Saudi Arabia and Egypt, and let me see if I have a listing of the others. I don't know if I do. Well, let's just call it really darn close to a half a dozen African banks do the exact same thing. They brought their gold home from the New York Fed, because the New York Fed and the Bank of England have been holding everyone's gold for years, because the New York Fed is in essence the COMEX, and the Bank of England in essence the London Metals, the London Bullion Market Association, where these metals are all traded. So they're held in safekeeping for trading if they ever need to do it. And in the meantime, everyone felt that it would be safe to keep it in the UK and in the United States, but that trust is being eroded. So you need to inspire confidence when you issue a new system, a new currency, and that will be a currency that will be pegged to a commodity like gold, the only other tier one reserve asset in the world that the most well-funded traders on the planet continue to buy hand over fist, using the suppression of the Western paper markets to run cover for their acquisition and for real price discovery. And they will meld, I believe, the gold that they hold on their ledger or on their books with some form of a blockchain technology to show the world, to inspire confidence, to inspire veracity and immutability. So yes, I don't know that it's Tether. That seems to be kind of a lightning rod and the center of a lot of question marks. But indeed, I think the new system, whatever that system is, will be a marriage of commodities and blockchain technology. Even the new BRICS currency, we've been told for 3 years by the Russian finance minister, Sergei Glaziev, that it will be a basket. And he has intimated that it will be a basket of 40% local currencies, those currencies involved in the system, and a basket of commodities, 60%, which has to be primarily gold, which is the world's only other tier one asset. So absolutely, don't mean to answer this in such a roundabout way, but it deserves explanation.
No,
and yes,
yes.
I think that is the future of money, will be monetization, or will be a form of digitization, if you will, just a marriage, let's just say, of blockchain technology and commodities. Because you'll never get someone to drink the Kool-Aid again when the West is pissed in it in the punch bowl so many times, over and over again for so many years. No one's going to drink that again until there is a whole new punch bowl, and with the ability to prove that it is indeed backed by something that will prohibit and inhibit the governments from doing what they always have, and that is inflate their way out of problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I thought it was interesting we chose Russia to pick on, and probably, I mean, say what you will about Putin, but his country financially run, they have almost no debt, in a much better state of financial clarity. I don't know what to say. They've handled their
doesn't say much for sanctions when their currency was the best performing currency in the world last year, in the midst of Western sanctions. So I don't think the whole world looks at the situation quite the way that the United States does.
Yeah, I think he has done a good job with a lot of things, but people don't want to say anything good about him. Once people start demonizing, they want to say everything's bad. But I think a clear look shows that we kind of picked on the wrong guy for the wrong reason, and their economy, it looks like it's doing better, than it was. So they found a way to do it. I had another question. I've seen where states like Tennessee has a gold reserve now. They had authorized a gold reserve. They literally said, for the reason of being able to not be under the thumb of the federal government. And I was like, wow, what do you see happening there? That's happened with a bunch of states.
It's the American spirit, maybe. We seem to do the best with our backs against the wall, pushing back against the brain-dead monetary policy of the Fed and the wholly irresponsible fiscal policies of the government, where we're creating right now $1 trillion of debt every 100 days. It took 200 years to do that the first time. And so when you talk about all of these states that have recognized legal tender gold and silver coins as currency, some of them has gone as far as recognizing them for payment for all debts, public and private, including paying your property taxes. But I think the legislature from Idaho said it best, and I'll paraphrase, when he got up on the legislative floor, on the floor of the House legislator, and he said, we need to give our constituents the same type of ability to sidestep monetary policy of the Federal Reserve the way that many of the central banks are doing, and to get out of the way of the devaluation of the dollar. And so that's exactly what these states are doing. They are recognizing that the path that we are on is not sustainable, that the amount of debt that we have created. Look, people don't understand, William, how big this debt problem is. Everyone hears this $34 trillion debt. $1 million isn't what it used to be when you and I were kids. $1 million was a dream. Gosh, hope someday I have $1 million. And now anyone who works a lifetime will have earned $1 million. Doesn't mean they're going to save it, but it doesn't really inspire fear when we think about how big the numbers are. When we hear trillion, it sounds like million. A trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. When you talk about accumulating $1 trillion in debt every 100 days, when you talk about almost $35 trillion national debt, that excludes things such as Medicare Part B, 99 trillion underfunded, Medicare Part D, prescription side of things, 22 trillion underfunded, Social Security, 77 trillion underfunded, government military pensions, and all of the entitlements make up almost 200 trillion in total unfunded liabilities, and no one really talks about that. So when you realize how big the debt problem truly is and the ramifications of this, yeah, I think it's the states are doing their constituents a favor. The question is, are any of them listening? I think this is the time whereby if you are not a contrarian, you're destined to be a victim, and if you are fully invested in dollars in this in a environment where we see global de-dollarization and de-treasurization by the most sophisticated and well-informed traders on the planet, which are always in front of the public. So, they're always going to position themselves before the trend. Then you're destined to go broke if things go really badly. And that is because of our ridiculous, irresponsible spending addiction. And we are, in essence, insolvent and broke and damn near close to 130% debt to GDP, about 127, 128. There's never been a country, to my knowledge, ever that has crossed the 130% debt to GDP Rubicon without either outright defaulting or hyperinflating, which is the same thing. And so, we are not in a position, I think, from the rest of the world's opinion, to go around the world dictating we are insolvent, we're broke, we've lost our way here at home with the border crisis, the electoral issues, the judicial issues, the wokeness, the inner cities that have gone astray. All of these problems in this country is not lost on the rest of the world. And, I think it's getting old for people to hear us go around the world and through sanctions of the SWIFT system or weaponization of the treasury market, going around and imposing rules when we, in essence, are broke and insolvent and viewed at, unfortunately, sadly, by much of the Southern Hemisphere as being hypocritical. Yeah, it's one of these deals where the states are offering their people an out, and I just wonder how many people are really paying attention.
Yeah. What, for the average guy out here, what do you think would be what part would gold and silver play in him securing his future, or how do you see the individual? What would we tell the people? Hey, here's a good plan for you.
Pay yourself first. When I started this company 34 years ago with my father, I was barely 20 years old, and he told me there'll be one rule and only one rule, and that rule will be that I will buy something every 2 weeks when I get paid, gold or silver. Okay, Dad, I can deal with that. He's been retired for over 2 decades, but I've honored my promise to him, and it's the best gift I've ever been given by anyone, ever. That is to prioritize myself and my future first. And I don't care if it's 1 ounce of silver or 50 ounces of gold. Throughout 34 years, I have honored that promise. He's been retired for 2 decades. I've still honored my promise. He's not going to fire me anymore if I miss a 2-week period, but I haven't. And that helps people understand the laws of compounding. Compounding doesn't just have to be with interest. It can be with time. It's like anything that you want to become good at. You want to work out and have that beach body, you want to diet, whatever it is, you want to work on a relationship. It requires constant maintenance and being monotonous, being completely regimented. I should say it's being very regimented in your plan. And that was the best gift my father's ever given me. Prioritize yourself. You never get off the wheel. You never get out of the rat race if you don't pay yourself first. And so I guess that to me would be the most important thing I would say to people. And when we talk as a result of that rule that I learned 34 years ago, it's changed the way, right from the get-go, actually, the way that I look at gold and silver. To me, it is not an investment, never has been. It is wealth, William, that has outlived 2 world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, every pandemic. And here we are coming full circle where the most well-informed traders in the world, the central banks, are buying more month over month over month over month than at any time in history. And first quarter 2024 was the biggest first quarter in history in gold accumulation by the central banks, only bettering last year, quarter 1 2023. This is a trend that is not stopping, and they use the suppression of the paper price on the LBMA and on COMEX, which is rehypothecating the metal being sold in paper form, meaning sold over and 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 over again to the same the same bars are sold over and over and over again to the same people or to different people, because no one ever stood for delivery on these exchanges until now. And what's changing the environment is that when these exchanges were first formed, the London Metals Exchange, or London Bullion Market Association, is 140 years old, but the COMEX was formed in 1974. These countries weren't sophisticated enough, wealthy enough, coordinated enough, or had any desire to stand for delivery. They wanted U.S.-based assets, securities, bonds, real estate, you name it. This was the place to be. And now that's changing. And so what you have is a desire by these countries in India, who imported 1.5 times the amount of gold that they bought all of last year in the first 4 quarters, and then repatriated 100 metric tons, or again, India, who bought more silver in the first 4 months than they did all of last year. They bought 600 million ounces of silver in the last 2.5 years. That's over 10 times what is on the COMEX in terms of the registered category, the bars that are available for delivery. These countries realize that if we're going to be dumb enough to suppress these metal prices to support the illusion of a strong bond market and a strong dollar, because it is the canary in the mine shaft, the price of gold represents really the inverse relationship between real interest rates and gold. I mean, they're inverted to one another. So if you have low interest rates for all these years, you have to step on the price of gold. And these short trades on COMEX and the LBMA by these commercial banks, which are done in massive quantity, is the Achilles heel of the Western system. Because if these traders, like the Bank of India, Saudi Arabia, Russia, through their sovereign wealth funds or any other mechanism, stand for delivery on COMEX and the LBMA, which they've been doing, these contracts have a delivery component to them. And if it's what's called naked, meaning the banks just created a paper contract and sold it to drive down the price, and all of a sudden you get these sovereign nations who are like, I don't care, I'll stand for delivery, I don't care what the price does. Now you got to come up with the metal to deliver. And this is where it becomes a problem, because they are rehypothecated many times over, meaning sold to different people the same unit. If everyone stands for delivery, the whole thing blows up. And we're, I think, as close to that as we have ever been in my career. So, the price potential is parabolic on this stuff as far as I'm concerned. So you buy what you can when you can. Little by little, you accumulate, you prioritize yourself first. I don't care if it's 1 ounce of silver, whatever it may be, look at it as wealth. You don't buy it to get wealthy, but you buy it because it has been wealth since the beginning of time. And if you own enough of it, you'll become wealthy. But when you realize the most well-funded and well-informed traders in the world are buying it at the level that they have been, it should tell you the priority. And when you realize that gold was reclassified by the Bank of International Settlements as the only other Tier 1 reserve asset, you should understand what the powerful people have in store for gold and silver. It speaks volumes. Do as they do, not as their rhetoric betrays their actions. And I think you'll be better off in the end.
Yeah, that reminds me of something that I'd thought, which was, with gold, I can go anywhere and buy any currency, and that led me to think this. They would have to do it secretly, I suppose, but I think, if you can print your own money, are there nations, you believe, maybe printing their own money and just buying gold with it? And, because they're trading something that is a declared value for intrinsic value, and it seems like it would be a wise thing to do.
Well, I'm sure to the best of their ability, absolutely. And you look at a country like China with the trade imbalance that we've had with them for years, they're selling us their party favors and trinkets. Not only are they the largest importer of gold in the world, they're the largest producer of it, and they don't export an ounce. You can't export gold out of China. So, you have they've been mining gold for years with our trade imbalance, even if it was uneconomical. Alistair MacLeod, a man that I have a lot of respect for, assumes that they have 38,000 metric tons of gold, which would be about 16, 17 times more than they admit to, that they have 20,000 or so metric tons by the state and 18,000 held by the people. That would in total be at least 5 times more than the U.S. supposedly has. Now, the gold held at Fort Knox has not been audited since 1956. So who knows how much we really have. We're supposed to have 8,300 metric tons. Alistair says they have 38 to 39,000. The bottom line is that, yes, I think these countries have been accumulating it any way they can and not reporting it to the IMF the way that many think they do. There is no reason to tell the IMF, with International Monetary Fund, how much gold each one of these countries own. They keep it close to the vest. And yeah, I would say absolutely. You would be foolish not to, not just gold and silver, but rare earths. So look, for example, the Chinese bought the London Metals Exchange 2 years ago. It's a London-based metals exchange that trades all of the base metals, copper, zinc, lead, you name it. So they're going around the world with their Belt Road Initiative and their BRICS and establishing relationships, more cooperative than coercive for sure, where they are industrializing countries in Africa and South America, where they are building roads and bridges and maritime channels and railways. They're helping these countries produce things like oil and gold, building refineries and gold mines and silver mines and the means to extract and then move it, transport it through the country, and then ultimately industrialize. And this is about a system, again, that's all about commodities. And so, because in the end, what really matters, and it's the building blocks, the physical commodities that you need to thrive, and they understand that. So it's more than just gold and silver. It's farmland. It's oil and gas reserves. It's precious metals reserves, and it's establishing relationships with these under industrialized countries in Africa and South America that are very much natural resource rich, and taking a piece of it for the industrialization and for the bringing them, into a more, enhancing their middle class, enhancing their standard of living. And that's the way business should be. It should be mutually beneficial. Now, it's not like there's perfection in the way that they work with these countries. And I'm sure some of these countries end up debt laden and aren't really good at managing their affairs, but that's not the point. The point of it is that the Chinese understand that more through cooperation than coercion and more than debt instruments from a broke country like bonds, which have a very small history in a historical sense as being an asset. That the debt of another country is an asset. What? I'd rather have gold and oil and copper and silver and wheat and soybeans, and that's where we're going. And China is leading, and the BRICS nations are leading the charge in this. And the countries that are applying to BRICS, over 59 now, are all either very resource rich in the ground, and both have very strategic shipping lanes and ports and ways of disseminating this stuff around the world safely. It's a union that should not be underestimated, and it's growing by the day, one that understands the significance of the real thing rather than promises. And promises that, as we can see, we don't like the way you're doing things, well, we're going to steal your assets. And that becomes a whole different animal that will speed up the de-dollarization, the de-treasurization, and the erosion of trust in the Western system.
Yeah. Do you think that there is a moment that will instigate when countries will say or switch over to a gold program or precious metals, and that'll be revealed?
The BRICS have been talking about it. The IMF has talked about it. I don't know when, but in a world of probabilities, I would say there is an extremely high probability that we will see a new system that will be pegged to gold. There is no other reason that the most well-funded, well-informed bank in the world, the BIS, Bank of International Settlements, it is known as the central bank or central bank, that they would have reclassified gold as the world's only other tier one reserve asset. And when you see the central banks buying it the way they are and repatriating it, bringing it home, there's 100%, there's no other reason they would have done that. Kristalina Georgieva, the head of the IMF, said a central bank digital currency not pegged to something is just fiat. What would make the most sense to peg to? Well, gold, the only other tier one reserve asset in the world. And, President de Gaulle from France proved that convertible currencies convert when he drained the majority of the gold held at the Treasury. And that's why Nixon closed the gold window 53 years ago. And so it doesn't need to be convertible where you can walk into, just like this right here, it's a $20 gold certificate, 50, 100, 10. But this is a $20 gold coin. So this $20 gold certificate was the same thing as that $20 gold coin. what it says in the bottom, our new bills say, "In God we trust." Well, this says payer. It says paid to the bearer on demand in gold coin. So you could walk into the bank prior to 1933 and exchange this for this or this for this. That won't happen. You don't need to do that. And instead, you can show the immutability and the veracity of it instead of allowing for redemption. Just show it on a blockchain and have it audited by independently audited to show that yes, it really is there. And so we are maintaining control of the currency and of the amount of currency that is created. It's a way for them to have their cake and eat it too. So yeah, I 1000% believe that will happen. It just is a matter of what ignites the fuse. Where does it start from? Does it start from the BRICS? Does it start from the West to preempt the the exodus out of the dollar as they issue the West, or the BRICS or the Southern Hemisphere nations issue a gold-backed currency or a commodity-backed currency? But ultimately, yes, it's the only way to get people to drink the Kool-Aid ever again.
Do you think there'll be a worldwide reevaluation of gold and silver, or will that happen?
You know what's funny? If you looked at every central bank balance sheet, and they hold gold in an account called the gold revaluation account. That's the name of it. That's what Roosevelt did right behind me. He confiscated gold, which they won't do this time because back then everyone owned it. It was in their pockets. It was currency. But he confiscated gold, paid everyone, for that $20 gold coin, you got paid $20.56, I think. And, in 1933, 56 cents was decent money, actually. I mean, it compared to what it is now was probably, worth, a lot more than it is now. 56 cents and probably, maybe 5, 6, 10, 20 bucks now. I don't know what it was, but I mean, a dozen eggs was probably a nickel, and a gallon of milk, a nickel, and whatever. So figure that out for yourself. That would buy you what? 10 dozen eggs. What is that? That would be now 25 bucks, 30 bucks. So 50 cents was worth something. People were okay with it. And then he devalued the dollar by 40%, making gold worth 35 bucks an ounce. So, and that would be a way to offset the debt on your balance sheet with an asset that you're holding when you revalue it. And this is where the idea of gold pegged to a new system comes into play. Let's say all of these nations revalue gold at $5,000 or $10,000 an ounce, and then peg gold to it, where each currency unit, let's say, has 40% backing. And so it's backed. Each currency unit is backed 40% by gold and shown on a blockchain for the mutability, and it's audited. That gives them 60% more monetary latitude to create money, to do things that they need to do within the economy, but a tether holding it tight so that once you cross that line of 60%, loan to asset to loan value or creation value, whatever you want to call it, then you're done. You're locked out until you either mine more gold or put more gold in the system.
Oh, I see.
Or find a way to retire some of the other debt. Money creation.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. I never heard that before.
Well, that's the way they did it before when gold, was pegged, and in years past, like in Switzerland, they did it that way, and they used a percentage backing. You don't need to have it convertible if you have blockchain technology, and you don't need to do one-to-one if you can show the veracity and the amount, specifically with immutability on a blockchain. And the key to me is to have it independently audited by, all sorts of independent international auditors that come and say, yeah, it's there, and we're good to go. That would inspire confidence in a system that is completely void of any and all confidence.
So here's a loaded question for you. Do you have a favorite cryptocurrency, utility coin, or otherwise?
I mean, I own a little bit of Bitcoin just because I didn't want to go through my career and say I knew I should have done that. I own Theta, which has utility. It's because BixWeir is a good friend of mine, talked me into seeing the utility in it, and those are the only two that I own. I am not a crypto basher. I'm a very big crypto neophyte. I just think that the two communities could be complementary to one another rather than adversarial. We both see the reasons to go into these spaces as problems with the dollar, problems with the system, one group wants to get rich, the other group wants to keep what they made. So be that as it may, if you marry the two together, one, when you take some of these, make some of these profits, take them off the table and put it into gold, which has the 5,000-year track record, and every central bank in the world owns it. It underscores the relevance of it. So, it doesn't need to be, they don't need to be mutually exclusive of one another. They can be very complementary to one another for sure.
Yeah, I see it that way. I see that if a cryptocurrency is backed partially by gold, it brings intrinsic value to the cryptocurrency. Otherwise, isn't it just like the ultimate fiat currency?
Well, a cryptocurrency backed by gold, it does, but you have to quantify where is it held, who's holding it, what form is it in, and is it redeemable, and those kinds of things. If addressed the right way, could certainly make it a very, very intriguing proposition. But, the thing about gold and silver is that it's an asset that is not simultaneously anyone else's liability.
Yeah.
And so having it in your possession, there's a lot to be said for it. And even in the form of crypto, which would make it very convenient and transparent, or give you the ability to transport it, rather, it still isn't the same thing as having it physically in your hand with no counterparty risk, in a world that I think will become very systemic when things start to break, and it will pull down institutions, or a nuclear bomb set off way up in the atmosphere over in the middle of the country in Wichita, Kansas, would blow up the internet across the whole country, and that shockwave, that EMP, and then what? So I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just simply saying that there are ways to shut down the system like that. If you're talking a digital system, an EMP or a solar flare or whatever it may be, and not to say that that's going to happen. I'm just simply saying that there is no perfect solution. But the one thing that I do like about gold and silver in this world where everyone is so indebted, over leveraged, and undercapitalized, in particular the banks and all of the system, having something outside the system with no counterparty liability is very important to me. And you can see it's important to all the other countries that I mentioned that have been returning their gold from the Bank of England and the New York Fed. Removal of counterparty risk, I think, is something that will have greater significance in the coming months and years ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I've bought from Miles Franklin gold and silver and been able to build up some. By the way, I went to your website. It looks fantastic.
Well, I appreciate that. And for people who want really good prices that we don't publish on the website, send us an email at info@milesfranklin.com. Say, William Fix sent me, and we'll make sure that you get a special price list.
Excellent.
One that will be probably more competitive than just about anyone in America. And we don't publish that for various reasons. We like to keep it close to the vest, but we only allow purchasing up to 10,000. And on that website, a version 2, which will really kind of be a complete makeover, which will be far more user-friendly, is near completion. And that will be rolled out very soon. But in the meantime, certainly you can go there for information, and thank you for the compliment. But if people want prices that will be very tough to be beat, send us an email at info@milesfranklin.com. Any questions that you may have as well, you can be asked, and we'll reply to them. Or if you just want the price list, that'd be great too. But it will be worth your listeners' times to do that, to see the prices that we can offer for your listeners.
Yeah, the experience I had was fantastic, and I saw something about your ratings and your feedback. And am I right that you guys have never had negative feedback?
Well, we've made mistakes for sure. My wife doesn't think that I've ever made a mistake, and of course, but we've made mistakes, William, but we've always made it right. And I think people are defined less by the mistakes they make and more by the way they address them and accept accountability and fix them. But yes, we've never had a material customer complaint in 34 years and
wow,
damn near 10 billion in sales. We maintain an A+ rating without ever having a complaint. And So it's something we're very, very, very proud of. We are also, I live in Delray Beach, Florida, where we've had a satellite office for 20 years. But I left Minnesota 3 years ago during the George Floyd riots and the defunding of the police, and Minnesota kind of fallen off its axis. But I left my corporate entity there because it's the only state in America that regulates what is a federally non-regulated industry. So on top of our reputation, on top of being one of only 27 U.S. Mint authorized resellers, we are licensed and bonded and background checked annually. And Minnesota is the only state that mandates it. So most of the industry has boycotted the state of Minnesota as a result, because it's the only state in the country where this applies. Whether you are in the state or sell into the state, you must be background checked, bonded, and licensed with continuing education and compliance with the Department of Commerce in the state of Minnesota. It's onerous.
Yeah.
And so most companies say, nuts to Minnesota will work elsewhere. Well, it holds us to a higher standard. We're held to a higher standard, and we embrace it. And so, yeah, we're proud of our reputation in a federally non-regulated industry and in a commodity-driven industry where it's homogenous. You eat a McDonald's hamburger in Milwaukee versus Minneapolis versus Florida, that should all taste the same, right? With a commodity, you buy from the company or the person more than anything, and reputation is important. And something we're very proud of. So thank you for acknowledging that.
Oh, absolutely. Another thing, I think the last thing is there something that you're putting together right now that we haven't heard about that you'd like to talk about?
Well, we have struck a deal with Glint. We will be their U.S. representative, which is a way to turn gold and silver, gold for now, silver later, to turn it into something that is a utility. They have a relationship with MasterCard where you can spend your gold and have it held at a Brinks vault currently in Switzerland. You have the ability to take that gold and turn it into physical gold through us and take possession of it. Offers a good deal of utility, a really, really beautiful iPhone and Android app that goes along with it. Not really. I mean, we're a company that I think has focused on the same thing for 34 years, and that is, wealth and wealth preservation. And so, as boring as it may seem, to me, gold really is something that is more analog than it is digital, albeit my relationship with Glint is kind of a realization and a recognition that the world keeps moving. And even though in my mind gold is really analog rather than digital, the world is moving increasingly digital. So I have great confidence in the folks at Glint. After having several meetings with them in the UK, I'm very confident where it's stored with Brinks. Miles Franklin has had a almost 2-decade-long relationship with Brinks Global Services and have 9 vaults around North America, all Brinks administered. And it took me a while to come to this point, to find a company that I really wanted to work with. So if anything would be new, it is our relationship with Glint. We will be their U.S. contact. But short of that, no. I mean, I think indeed everyone should own physical gold and silver in their own possession and minimize their exposure to the system, because things are starting to accelerate in a way that makes me very uncomfortable. And it starts with all of these countries around the world no longer hoarding and accumulating U.S. treasuries and dollars in favor of local currencies and commodities. And that leads to a very dark place if it happens, if it goes from a slow and steady de-dollarization, de-treasurization into a flood. And when that flood happens, it will overwhelm the system, the byproduct of which, that massive dumping globally of dollars, would be interest rates that would spike tremendously to compensate for the loss of purchasing power in an inflated currency. And when those rates spike, and I'm one of the few, Martin Armstrong also, who talks about rates going much higher, not lower, I believe they will. Everything in this country that makes people feel wealthy, including the banks and the insurance companies, are all inversely correlated to a large spike in rates. So, yeah, I think it's time for people to reevaluate the situation. And like I said, if you're not a contrarian, I think you're destined to be a victim before this is all said and done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, one thing I like about gold, it'll survive an EMP.
Yes, it will. You know, it's that's what I mean by being analog in a digital world.
Mm-hmm.
And it will survive a banking crisis, and it will
Mm-hmm.
survive a market collapse, and it'll survive everything in your own possession. You have a better chance of being ripped off by the system, William, than you do by anyone knowing you have gold in your house. And you know, in a in a tube like this big, you could have $50,000 worth of gold in there. So when you talk about, gold being very easily hidden and concealed and transported,
Mm-hmm.
it's true.
Yeah.
It's not something that takes up a whole lot of space. So, yeah, I think the removal of counterparty risk is a big deal.
Yes, sir. Awesome. Well, listen, thank you. Thank you for spending time with us. I love everything.
Love to come back. I appreciate
Yes,
you
sir.
having me on, and let's pick up where we left off. Do it again, because we got the this giant BRICS meeting in October, the biggest election of our lives in November. I'm sure there'll be
Oh,
lots
yeah.
to talk about leading up to it, God willing, we get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know what you think, about politics, and politics is kind of hard to talk about because, people get so volatile. But whether you like Trump or not, I don't think the integrity of the last election, I don't believe there was any.
Well, I
Too
heard
loosely
someone say
held.
the other day, about Biden, and it's crazy how people in the media don't acknowledge this. But if you met him as your heart surgeon, as you're laying on the gurney, as they're going to roll you into the operating room, and you met him, would you say, I'm out? Or if you met him as you're walking onto an airplane and he was standing there frozen looking at you, he's the pilot of your airplane, would you get on the plane?
Oh, my
That
gosh.
he's the leader of the free world. And I find it really, to me, the craziest thing about it all is how in his diminished mental state that there isn't a unified consent among the entire country that this man is not fit to run the country. And it just makes me believe that he isn't running the country at all. The fact
Yeah.
that they want to run him out for another election is just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe if he makes it to the election, they may pull him out. It's so bad. We'll
Well, I
see.
would say that the current administration has done more to harm this country in the past few years than any external foe could have done.
Yeah.
And I mean, you don't have to go much further than the immigration problem. If 17 million people have entered this country illegally, and 1% want to do harm to the country, that's 170,000 people. 5%, you're talking two times the size of any standing army or more. 1/10 of 1% is still 17,000 people who are very capable of causing a lot of problems. And so I think it's disgraceful. Then you add on to it the wokeness, the cancel culture, the censorship, the questioning of the judicial system, the questioning of the electoral system, the chaos and lawlessness in the inner cities. All of this stuff to me is far more disturbing than the complete gross negligence of our fiscal policy, the
Hmm.
irresponsibility of it, where we're creating $1 trillion in debt every 100 days, where it took 200 years to do it the first time, or our brain dead monetary policy, where we've created more money in the past 4 years than in the entire history of the country preceding it.
Hmm.
All of these things are going to be very difficult to come back from. So I think Trump would have a better chance of bringing us back, pulling out of the nosedive. And fortunately, this country seems to have done best with its back against the wall. But what has really bothered me, maybe more than anything, is and I don't know if it was fostered by this current administration or the media that covers it, is the lack of unity in the United States. The fact that we used to all be united, go back to World War II, there
Hmm.
was no divisiveness. You weren't defined by who you voted for in the last election. And now we're a completely divided country where no matter what happens in November, half the country's pissed off. So
Yeah.
the first place to start is to put aside these stupid differences and start to remember we're all Americans and that we are damaging our
Amen.
our 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 place in the world by this lack of unity and all of this chaos, and it's not lost on the rest of the world. So That's a good place to start. But like I said, there'll be lots to talk about, William, over the next few months.
Yes, sir. Andy Schectman for president.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but nonetheless, I'm happy to comment about it and try to do so with respect. Say what you want about Biden, I still have respect for the office of the presidency.
Sir.
I just don't like all of the things that have come out of that office in terms of policy over the last several years. And
I agree with that. But I will
think in terms of the way people think about Trump, a lot of people don't like his brash behavior. I would take policy over personality any day, especially now. And I think this is the most important election of our lives. I think everyone needs to get out and vote. And
I agree.
And just remember, when you talk about how big these problems are, when you're trying to talk to people who don't get it, a trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. We're in trouble. We're spending $1 trillion every 100 days in debt that your children and grandchildren and mine will have to pay and be responsible for. We need a change. We need to do things. We need to change things. We need to regain confidence and trust and regain our image in the world's eyes. And anyways,
I agree.
It's an important time in history, and it's nice to ride shotgun with guys like you and talk about it as we get closer to its realization. So have me back as we get closer,
sir.
And
sure
love
will
to pick up where we left off.
Thanks again. God bless you, buddy. Thanks for spending time with us.
Brother, to you and everyone else out there. Have a great rest of your day, and let's talk soon.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.